I get the honor of moderating this panel today, which is exciting. There's a number of folks up here who are doing some really innovative things. My first question is, how many of you have ever heard of the circular economy? So I'm going to assume the rest of you have not heard of that. So good. We'll talk a little bit about the circular economy. It's a term that actually is fairly new being in 1990. And essentially it means that every output that comes from, consumerism, from manufacturing, from our products, is an input for something else. So it's actually a design principle, and we'll share some of the slides in that in a moment. But I'm going to make a little confession here. I've kind of taken some liberties on what the circular economy is here. There's a lot of other trends that are taking place right now. The sharing economy, for example, is growing at a tremendous rate. There's a range of collaboration. There's folks here who are taking products that might go to the landfill and reusing them. And those aren't quite 100% part of the circular economy. But the circular economy really is an approach, and you can see the first bullet here is it's taking away and changing the linear economy, where we typically get a product, we use it, and then we throw it away. And the circular economy is saying, wait a minute, if we design with the right principles, everything that you use can be used for something else. Anyone here, have you heard of the book called Cradle to Cradle? That's a similar methodology, and what they say is that everything that you use can either go back into using for technology, so it's a man-made product, or it's a biological product, so it gets composted. So it's real interesting that there's a whole range of different thoughts around how we start managing waste and what we do. One of the things that's very interesting about circular economy, and it's interesting is in talking with Councilmember Hucker's office and working with the council, is the second word, which is economy right now. And I'll give a shout out Doug Weisberger for DEP, Department of Environmental Protection. Part of what's very interesting is you have environmental work groups now starting to work with economic groups, and the two really have a lot of synergy. And the circular economy is really about bringing those two lines of thinking together. So a lot of it is about recovering and regenerating products and eliminating the end of life. So no product will actually have an end of life. It'll always find another purpose. And if you start looking at the circular economy, a lot of it is starting to articulate value. And I spoke to each of the different panelists here. They're not only going to talk about their social benefits of what they're working on, but there's also an economic benefit that they're creating as well. So they'll talk a little bit about that. And that's not only job creation, although I think in many of them they'll talk a little bit about that. The renewable energy is a big part of that. So if you talk about not wasting, if you talk about fossil fuels, there's obviously a large waste that comes from fossil fuels in carbon. So just because you can't see that waste doesn't mean it's not happening. So renewable energy and a lot of the innovations that are coming around that is very core to the principles that we're starting to look at in the circular economy. Diversity, another big term you would look in economic development, trying to create a diverse economy. So we intentionally brought together 5 panelists here who I'll introduce, who are completely different business models. And what makes it interesting is they all have a lot in common. I would imagine they don't even know each other quite yet, so they're going to get a chance to actually see where each other comes from and how they're part of a bigger movement that's taking place in the county. And then I'm going to introduce something very intriguing in a few moments about a possible way of branding that and starting to share some ideas about building a bigger movement in the county. And as I mentioned a moment ago, the sharing economy, I can't not bring that up right now. It is a $26 billion economy. And sharing is taking a lot of different shapes. You have Uber, you have, which is like a ride sharing, so that's an on-demand type of technology. You have Airbnb, those are some of the more well-known ones. But if you think about co-working space, people are sharing resources right now. Do you know in power drills there are, I think it's 13 million power drills in the United States, and the average power drill gets used for 8 minutes a year? 8 minutes a year? So think about that. If you're thinking about resources, now it might not be great for the power drill businesses, but it certainly is good in a number of other ways. There's other ways of creating jobs around that. So I'm looking at this, and my eyes can't see that. That's a little bit tough here, but I'll describe it as best as I can. And I already talked about it. So if you look at the green on the upper side, those are the inputs. And it talks about different resources that are coming into the system. So one of the things you might look at is when you're talking about the circular economy, food is very much a part of the circular economy. And Colin was talking a bit about doing food reclamation. That tends to be on the other end. But Montgomery County has an ag reserve and has the potential to have one of the largest food systems in the nation. We have almost 100,000 acres that are designed for food. So then you have throughout here the different processing, the production. Then you have the manufacturing. Then on the blue, which is hard to see, is there's a whole set of industry opportunities to actually take those materials and reshape them so that they stay in a loop as opposed to going out of the loop. And the key word in that whole picture is what's right in the middle, is design. And when Wendy was reading my bio, I'm doing a lot of work right now with supply chains. That's my full-time job at Green America. And we actually look at bringing the whole systems in the room and identifying how do you change a system. Every player needs to be involved in those kinds of discussions. And if one company wants to change and move to organic food, for example, it doesn't happen unless every other partner is part of that discussion and process. So the design of a circular economy is really important. And next slide, please, Nick. So when you say who participates in this discussion, there's a whole range of folks. So the column on the left is the supply chain. And Montgomery County has hundreds of businesses that are in all of these different areas. We talk about raw material producers. We talk about the designers. So those are folks. We have people in all sorts of aspects of that. Productions and manufacturers. One of our speakers is talking about EcoPrint. They are actually working with paper. And think about the whole supply chain of paper and where it might go. Distribution and retail. We have someone who will be talking about retail. We're going to talk about clothing and where clothing might go. Collection and resources, and then obviously one of the big drivers of a supply chain is consumers, because they're the ones who are paying and they're the ones who are driving that whole thing. And if you look on the right, these are some of the industries. So when you talk about this isn't just manufacturing we're looking at. This actually concept is applicable in an entire range of industry sectors. And they affect everything. I like real estate. We think, how does real estate apply? Well, if you have a co-working space, same basic concept. If you have a desk that's not being used fully, then you actually can share that desk. And that's the whole idea behind co-working, incubators. And Steve Morris is going to talk a bit about a very fascinating model of sharing spaces and resources.